Born to German immigrants, Moses Carver was born in Dayton, Ohio on August 11, 1834. He grew up to marry Susan Blue in Springfield, Illinois. Moses and Susan moved to Missouri to start a 240-acre farm via a federal settlers land grant from the United States government. Moses needed help on his farm and purchased an enslaved 13-year-old girl named Mary from a neighbor. Mary had a son named George. Mary and George were abducted, and Mary was never found. George was an infant. Moses gave up his best horse for ransom to the kidnappers and was only able to recover George, the infant. George was raised by Moses and Susan Carver, his slave owners. George went to high school in Kansas, then Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, then Iowa State in Ames, Iowa. In 1892, when George was at Iowa State University, blacks were not allowed to live on campus. A kind professor named Henry C. Wallace took George Washington Carver into his home. George became a mentor to Professor Wallace's young son, Henry A. Wallace. As an adult, Henry A. Wallace went on to develop a hybrid corn that provided a high yield and was resistant to disease. Henry A. Wallace and his brother got investors together and started the Pioneer Hybrid Corn Company in 1926. Later on, Henry Wallace became the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under Franklin Roosevelt and later Vice President of the United States under Franklin Roosevelt. Before being sworn in as Vice President, Wallace visited some farms in Mexico. Inspired by his visit and the desire to improve farming in Mexico, Henry Wallace hired the Rockefeller Foundation to work with Mexico on improving their farming industry. The Rockefeller Foundation hired a scientist named E.C. Stackman to run its office in Mexico. E.C. Stackman in turn hired a scientist named Jacob George Dutch Harrar and made him the project leader. Dutch then hired a DuPont scientist in Wilmington, Delaware named Norman Borlaug. Norman was from Cresco, Iowa. Norman Borlaug developed high-yield and disease-resistant strains of wheat and corn while on the project in Mexico. These strains were introduced worldwide, afterwards saving billions of people from starvation. As a result, Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for his crop research, aiding in the end of starvation worldwide. In 1894, George Washington Carver became the first African American to earn a bachelor's degree of science. In 1896, he earned his Master's of Agriculture degree. That same year, Booker T. Washington recruited Carver to run the agriculture department at Tuskegee Institute, where he taught for over 40 years. Carver developed hundreds of products using peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans, including flour, vinegar, and non-food items such as stains, dyes, paints, and writing ink. He did not invent peanut butter. Carver used a mobile laboratory to teach poor farmers how to feed hogs acorns and other farm byproducts instead of using commercial feed, and how to fertilize crops with algae and swamp muck instead of hazardous and expensive fertilizers. His theories regarding crop rotation proved to be the most valuable both then and now. We are currently experiencing a worldwide soil crisis due to the lack of crop rotation, and the Gulf of Mexico has a large dead zone annually due to commercial fertilizer runoff from the north. In all, Carver developed more than 300 food, industrial, and commercial products from peanuts, including milk, Worcestershire sauce, drinks, cooking oil, salad oil, paper, cosmetics, soaps, and wood stains. Carver died on January 5, 1943 at Tuskegee Institute after he fell down the stairs at his home. He was buried next to Booker T. Washington, the first president of the university, on the grounds of Tuskegee University, now was Tuskegee Institute. You should take a moment to connect the dots, and hopefully you'll see why diversity has and always will be the key to an advanced society. Take a moment to look at where we've been so that we know where to go forward and not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Keep connecting those dots. This world is much smaller than you may think. Until next time.